Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And to be honest, there is not a lot of news to report when it comes to EVE Online, so we are going to jump straight into the market and get started. So as always, we take some plex stuff and we're gonna start with that at around 25 seconds. There we go. And let's take a look at plex themselves, which have gone back up in price to 3.3 million in GTA itself. If we take a look at the surrounding player-owned structures, it's 3.2 million, a little bit above that. So there is definitely a bit of a larger, no, it's actually not even that large a discrepancy. Yeah, there it is, 100,000 ISK. Yeah, it's a slightly larger margin between the sellers in GTA and the sellers in the player-owned trade hubs. When plex were going down, it was very close between those two. Buyers coming in at 3.2 million in GTA itself and coming in at 3.2, a little bit above that, in the player-owned trade hubs. So if we look at the price history, I think we can see the correction that was pretty severe, right? Going from 3.4 million all the way down to less than 3.2 million, and now we're on our way back up. I think basically that like a sale with holidays is what caused this correction, and that the general inflation trend is going to pick up again on the plex front. Should be interesting to take a look then at the multiple pilot ready certificate, which was very cheap, going for like 1.3 billion right here. A little bit of a jump up on that as well, but not that big, not reaching 1.4 billion just yet. So 1.374 billion ISK for the sellers, 1.314 billion ISK for the buyers. I think compared to 500 plex, still a pretty good purchase if you're looking to get that second training queue up and running on your own account. Next up here we've got some skill extractors, which of course mirror the plex chart almost perfectly. Looks pretty damn good. The discrepancies would usually be an individual sale on the extractors themselves. So here going for 363 million for the sellers, 362 million for the buyers. That is definitely a slight difference here. You still have somewhat of a margin. Well, it's also very tiny. 30,000 ISK is not that big, but the skill extractors, there's really no margin whatsoever between the sellers and the buyers. Now let's take a look at the large skill injectors next. This is what I would consider to be like an investment. If you're looking to get something for the longer term, and that's going to protect you against inflation, we've got the large scale injectors. You can definitely see the trend over the 1 year, right? Starting at around 620 million, ending at around 800 million. Quite a nice increase in prices. Would have been a very good investment. And what I liked about it for a very long time was that, of course, you had the general plex inflation. We all know that ISK inflates in the game. Normally, and as a result you had this protection against that if you bought the skill injectors. But on top of that, you had possible demand for skill points themselves, which would become an added benefit, an added potential increase in price for these large skill injectors. One thing to note though is that a lot of that demand I felt would come from the alpha clones, but CCP has been cutting down on the potential demand for the large skill injectors, because they've first chopped them up into larger pieces with a small skill injector, and now they're actually selling the SP directly up to a certain point for alpha clones with the daily alpha injector. This is going to probably turn down volatility, which we see right here from time to time. We had some nice volatility on the large scale injectors as well, creating very clear sell opportunities, right? If you were holding some of them that you bought for like 650 million this entire period here, you had a clear sell opportunity at 750 million with a nice sharp increase in price, and another one here at more than 800 million ISK as well. But we've been flattening out at the tail end, because plex has flattened out as well, of course. But I fear that the biggest advantage that I saw for the large skill injector was that potentially demand for skill points was going to add even more volatility and more potential to the item, and that is being cut down a little bit by CCP's actions. So I would still compare this as a good plex investment if you're looking to do it in a larger chunk of money to store that ISK and protect it from inflation, but the added advantages are definitely getting toned down here. Large scale injectors selling for 806 million, ISK buyers are at 792 million. Again, very narrow margin between the two. Next up, we'll take a look at a small scale injector selling for 174 million ISK and 155 million for the buyers. So if we look at the chart here, it's flat, where the large scale injector is up in price a little bit. The small scale injector seems to be flat, but it's a different scale as well. We still need a little bit of time until we get a 1 year chart for the small scale injector. And well, it's strange. Sometimes they don't really follow each other. I think that's going to actually happen more and more. The small scale injector of a price of around 160 to 170 million ISK is something that an alpha clone can work towards a lot more easily than the large scale injector. And so I do think that there will be a difference in demand between large scale injectors and small scale injectors, although I think from large ones you can create the small ones. So it should technically follow each other up very closely. And then finally we also have the daily alpha injector, which is very new of course, and so this one is pretty much flat at 60 million ISK, putting potentially a bit of a ceiling on the price of skill points. So because this is sold directly by CCP and it actually creates skill points in the game, it adds to the pool. It's not easily extractable skills normally, but eventually if that pool becomes big enough, it is going to have an impact, which should be lower prices for skill points themselves, as well as, well, they add to the general skill point pool, of course. 61 million almost for the sellers, 56.5 for the buyers. Also not that much of a margin, but a little bit larger than even the large skill injector and the small skill injector, I think, especially in percentages. So plex stuff back on the uptrend. We really have to be a little bit patient here and see what plex is going to do in the upcoming weeks and months. Next up, let's take a look at some minerals at 7:30. There we go. As always, we'll start with titanium, and this is pretty good news. We can see that titanium went back up a little bit and we are slowly closing in on 5 ISK. Will we make it? I think that lots of people will be dumping lots of titanium if it does reach 5 ISK, but if we now go for a Jita station itself, 486 for the sellers, 472 for the buyers. Definitely a bit of a comeback on the titanium front. Still not great. I would personally like to see this period come back. 5.5 to 6 ISK was really great for us high-sec miners, but getting close to 5 ISK once again. At least at this point, considering the entire chart, we're back on the average, and I would say if you want to sell some of your titanium, I wouldn't blame you. You can't endlessly keep holding stocks of titanium, keep building them up. Either the titanium, despite the fact that it's so common, it's also needed in such large amounts that it's actually quite unwieldy to move titanium around. So if you feel like getting rid of some of your titanium, definitely wouldn't blame you. Let's see if the other ones are following suit, and that's a big no. Pyrite trying to get to 5 ISK like around 10 days ago, but getting squashed right back on that increased price by a fresh supply. And actually you have data point here for less than 4.5 ISK. Let's see what the sellers are at. 457, buyers coming in at 413. Lots of strange buyers up to 477. 11 jumps out, but when it comes to Jita prices here, extremely cheap pyrite, way cheaper than titanium even, which is pretty damn crazy. Again, we're playing with 1-year lows for pyrite. Next up, our one hope, Mexalon, is doing okay, getting to 70 ISK here and seemingly staying there at the moment. Very happy to see this. 71 for the sellers, 66.57 for the buyers. Decent amounts coming in, of course, 380 million, 86 million, 57 million here. Those are decent amounts that are coming in. most of them I think in the last 24 hours, but here, just like with Tritanium, we have a bit of a comeback. We're back on 70 ISK, which is an okay average price. Would like to see Tritanium at 5 ISK to make the actual comparison there. Oops. But yeah, Mexlon back at 70. It's still what you want to mine for if you're mining in HiSec, and definitely you can sell your Mexlon if you're trying to convert your mining efforts into liquid ISK or ISK. I always should say ISK. Then definitely sell your Mexlon. You can do so. Isogen is in the exact same situation as Pyrite, of course, still playing with the 1-year lows as well, playing with that 40 ISK, where some investors are probably buying up some more of that cheap Isogen, but fresh supplies, as soon as we go back up in price, come in to squash any effort to come back here. So Isogen selling for 42.17, buyers are at 39.52, less than 40 ISK for buying of Isogen is crazy cheap, historically speaking, and obviously from the chart at a 1-year low price point. Next up we've got Noxium, which is also not in a good situation. It's not yet at a 1-year low point. We've been below 300 ISK before, but I think that we're basically playing with the 300 ISK margin now, just like with Isogen. So 309 for the sellers, but 287.44 for the buyers. So the buyers do want to get below 300 ISK by a substantial margin, and still 35 million coming in here. That's not good news. Almost a full front page as well of fresh sell orders. This is going to continue to put pressure on the Noxium price, and the real danger is if a couple of crazy guys become impatient with their Noxium stocks and start dumping towards less than 300 ISK, then look out below, we might actually get into trouble here. For now, 300 ISK is still being defended somewhat by the market, but not by the buyers, right? It's gonna be by the sellers having the patience to not just dump everything at ever lower prices. For nullsec, we'll start with Zydrine. That is continuing its descent, slowing down, trying to land at 800 ISK, but sellers 801 ISK, and buyers here are having none of that. 771 for the buyers of Zydrine. They want to continue to crash the prices. Personally, I like this, and I've been surprised at how this has not been the case during the last year, where I would say that Zydrine and Megasite were definitely cheaper than before the Ascension expansion, but we're not. We're still decent prices, I think, for these minerals, and I was sort of surprised by that the nullsec guys would either have the discipline to not bring enough of that to the market and to keep back, to hold back on the supplies of these nullsec minerals to keep those prices high, or just that the market was willing to still pay those prices that historically were low but still okay. And now here we're finally seeing that, well, these very cheap HiSec minerals are now also being pulled down, or also pulling down the prices of the nullsec minerals, which for me, from a HiSec player perspective, is actually very good, because now I can buy some really cheap Zydrine, build up some stocks, and if I want to do industry, I've got stuff at what I would feel to be a much more competitive price than 1000 ISK for Zydrine. So it's selling for 800 ISK, and the buyers are at 771, so you can easily, I think, pick up Zydrine for 780. Fresh sell orders here. All of this is in the last 24 hours, including 16 million here, another 7 million here, so that's definitely a decent amount as well. I think you can pick up some really cheap Zydrine at the moment. 1-year lows for sure, and finally, you know, I guess the nullsec guys are mining so much in total that there is even bigger stocks that are finally coming through to HiSec as well, that are being exported from nullsec in order to create liquid ISK for null. And as a result, the HiSec miners and the HiSec industrialists finally get to reap some rewards of all of that that mining and all of those cheap minerals as well. Megasite, I think, is stalling, but also stalling well below 1000 ISK. So here 13, 14, even 1500 has been the price. Yeah, 1250. to 1300 has been the price here, and so now Megasite selling for 988 and the buyers coming in at 946, less than 950 ISK for Megasite is actually pretty damn cheap as well, and a good price at a 1 year low price point once again. So not bad here, and if like me you have some industrial plans, actually have some industrial plans for the near future, this is very nice because you can pick up some really cheap minerals that you'll need. For Morphite next, bit of a jump up. This is quite interesting, up to 10,000 ISK, already on its way back down, so being squashed by a fresh supply. But 9,600 for the sellers and 9,000 for the buyers. Decently wide margin right there. But if we go from 8,200 to 10,000 ISK, that was almost practically a trade-worthy move here. That was a little bit lost on me. I didn't think it would have the momentum, but apparently it happened. Of course, the Tech 2 market is a little bit more volatile because of all of the moon mining changes, and Morphite is needed for Tech 2 production. It's really a unique mineral in this minerals batch here that went up quite substantially to 10k at the moment. So I would say if you really want to get rid of some of your investments and you manage to purchase that for 8,000 ISK, you can still try to put that on the market, but otherwise have some patience. I think we are going to go back down for Morphite. Next up, let's take a look at our PI section at 1610. There we go. Broadcast nodes first, continuing a slow decline, but basically starting to move with market forces in line with what it was before the introduction of the refineries, around 2.1 million ISK. 2 almost for the sellers, 2.1 practically for the buyers. Margin definitely closing. Fresh supply starting to slow down, which I wouldn't blame producers here. We are definitely a lot lower in price than before, so they'll probably be trying to look for other stuff to focus on, which is going to be hard with what the fuels are doing, but they'll have to try. Here are the construction blocks, slightly under pressure as well, probably a little bit less than average now. 11,700 for the sellers and 10,800 for the buyers. Construction blocks that did pretty damn well, stayed around average for 12k for a while, is now dipping below average as well. So broadcast nodes were in danger of getting below average, but supply is slowing down there. Construction blocks oversupplied a little bit and below average. Consumer electronics next, jumping back up, quite interesting. All of a sudden, something I didn't expect, because the entire PI market seemed to be quite depressed and under pressure from oversupply because of what was happening with fuels. But here, first sign of life once again, which is why I think it's been a year since it's added, but this has been one of you viewers' awesome suggestions. You told me, you know, add a PI section there at some point. I asked for which ones do you want to check. That's how this third section here came to life, and this is a very, very interesting one, because you always have discrepancies between different PI products, and it's often quite alive here. So consumer electronics, just a couple of weeks ago you could buy that very easily for 11,000 ISK, probably even close to 10,000 ISK, so in between those two, and currently it's already selling for 14,400 ISK, buyers up to 13,500 ISK, so a nice jump up here for consumer electronics, once again selling above average, showing that potential in PI. It's very difficult to predict, because sometimes you also have some of the goods that stay very low and very flat for a long time, but lots of different stuff. I find this a fascinating market with lots of potential for those that are willing to take some risk and are looking to actively trade. Coolants next for fuels. We all know that fuel demand has depressed with the change to moon mining. As a result, they are still playing around at 1 year lows. 8,100 for the sellers, 7,900 for the buyers. Very cheap coolants here. If you look at this entire chart, and if it wasn't for the information that fuel consumption is so depressed, this would be an incredible investment opportunity, of course. But the real question is, do you expect CCP to do something about that fuel consumption? I personally feel like if this continues, they might do that. Enriched uranium, ooh, definitely 1 year low, yet another dip down, 8,700 on the chart. 8,800 for the sellers, 8,700 for the buyers. Very, very cheap and reassuring at the moment. Next up here we've got the integrity response drones, actually starting to move sideways a little bit below the regular price of before, a bit below 2.5 million. So 2.4 million for the sellers, 2.3 million for the buyers. Fresh supplies here. Half a front page, but what is interesting here is 1600, 1100, 1600, 1300. And so if we look at this entire chart here, again for the longer term, and especially if you expect the introduction of another structure at some point, this could be a very good time to pick up some integrity response drones on the buyer side of things, in my opinion. Next up, mechanical parts staying pretty low as well. Of course, it is fuel related, staying below 10,000 ISK now. 10,000 for the sellers, 9,300 for the buyers. There's not much to say when it comes to the fuel related ones. You either take the gamble and start to slowly buy those up, or you stay away from that because you expect this to become the new normal range because of the lower fuel consumption. Nuclear reactors next. This one has been very interesting as well. You can see from the peak here in November that this is actually tied to structures, but this one has known a lot of volatility before as well, with lows at 75k and highs at 130,000 ISK as well. Currently stabilizing a bit, but 92,000 for the sellers, 87,500 for the buyers is actually, in my opinion, a pretty low price. So again, if you're looking for an early preparation on a potential introduction of some structures later on, you could invest in some of these nuclear reactors because we are well below average again on the chart here. We're not playing with the previous lows, but who knows, volatility might come back here. This was also a very interesting one that was actually added later. Robotics next, fuel related, and that is interesting. Volume increase in price as well. Bring the price back up above 90,000. This is obviously an investment. I think at the tail end we're already starting to decline a little bit, but a pretty decent investment when they could pick up robotics for less than 90,000 ISK. 90,000 ISK, sorry. 93,500 for the sellers, 89,000 for the buyers. So here is it's pretty obvious that someone made a bit of a move, expecting at some point that this will pay off if you pick up robotics for, let's say, less than 94,000 ISK. That's what happened right here, and I think it's a pretty good idea. I actually hold some stocks already, not very large stocks, because I want my ISK for the potential moon mining in Detail, which is part of my industry plans, but I'm definitely slowly buying some of that stuff as well. Self-harmonizing power cores back in line with what it was before the expansion. Bit of a volume spike here as well when we broke 2 million. So here again, some people do really have a close eye on PI and take advantage of the opportunities. 2.1 for the sellers, 2 million, almost 2.1 million as well for the buyers. Very narrow margin here, back on the regular price. Not as good as the integrity response drones on the chart. Superconductors next, something that I produce, unfortunately dropping back down again as well. 11,800 for the sellers, but 10,600 for the buyers. A very wide margin. Let's take a look at 10,600 on the chart here. That's around here on the chart, below almost everything. So we have this large discrepancy. Sellers aren't willing to budge, but buyers are ask for a very cheap price, historically speaking. So if you're looking for that investment, maybe try to put up a buy order that's a bit more aggressive, but stay below 11,000 ISK. I think if you look at the entire chart for 11k, that's definitely a good purchase, and then have the patience for that. But this is a pretty wide margin between the two, and superconductors is under pressure. We can see that from the tail end of the chart, which I think translates into potentially a nice little buy opportunity. I don't need to buy superconductors because I make plenty of them onto storm planets, but another one with decent potential. You can see lows 11,000 ISK here, highs 15,000 ISK and more as well. Not so bad if you can pick them up at a cheaper price. Test cultures next. This is the one that I had invested in. Here again you can see that this is an increased price tied to a new structure released. We are going back down at the tail end again, but not yet at the less than 7,500 buy opportunity, which is what I took advantage of. But for test cultures, pretty stable product. Actually, you need a lot of patience. 9,000 for the sellers, 8,300 for the buyers. You can see the lack of buyers here, and yet I would still say probably a little bit early to jump on the test culture train for the investments. And finally, we have the wetware mainframes also coming back in line with what it was before the introduction of the refineries, above 2.2 million, but not by too much anymore. 2.3 for the sellers, 2.25 for the buyers. So back in regular prices. Very interesting stuff though, some of them, and especially I like that the consumer electronics are showing some upwards trends as well for the first time in a decently long time for PI. Perhaps it's the precursor to more of that. Next up, the Tech 1 chips. That's gonna be a little bit different, I think, at 25.15. Because of course, with minerals depressed, including Gnosis minerals, you really don't need that much anymore to build these ships. I think demand is pretty low as well, so let's not expect great prices here. The Apocalypse went back up a little bit after the massive drop, which was the introduction of the arms race event in EVE Online. If you haven't kept up and you're only back for EVE Talk in 2018, then what happened here is that CCP launched an event through the agency where if you completed and got enough points, you actually got an Apocalypse for free. And so lots and lots of supply came in all of a sudden. You can see the volume increase right here, crashing the price to less than 130,000 million ISK. 130,000 would be really a bit cheap for a battleship. We're trying to claw our way back, but we still need quite a bit of time to actually absorb that. And of course, the cheap mineral prices won't be helping. Apocalypse selling for 139 million, bars are at 121 million for a battleship. The Caracal next continuing to be depressed as well. I think that this is the poster boy of the minerals. High point here probably, yeah, late summer, 11 million, and then going all the way back down to 9 million, and now playing with even lower prices than that. 8.7, almost 8.8 for the sellers, 8 million for the buyers of Caracal. Very, very cheap, and probably due to the minerals. The Catalyst is the one where, well, you see some volatility, some activity here, staying above 1 million ISK, not so bad. 1.4 for the sellers, 1 million for the buyers. Decently large margin here as well. There seems to be some interest in a Catalyst at the moment. Also, if you look at the volume spikes here, spikes up to 2,000 catalysts being traded in a day. Not insignificant for a Tech 1 ship, even if it is a destroyer. The Drake also took an arms race hit, is trying to come back a little bit, but staying well below the average, selling for 42 million. Buyers are at 38 million. If we draw the line here again, we could actually be back where the Drake should be because of the lower mineral prices. Ferox next, same story as the Caracal a little bit. Just again from the summer down to now, you can clearly see that the mineral prices have been crashing down both in HiSec and in nullsec, and so now the Ferox is probably selling for less than 45 million. Yeah, 44.8 million for the sellers, 40 million for the buyers. And what you should definitely notice here as well is that we often see, well, not for the Drake, and not for the Caracal. Those are pretty popular ships, but you will often find the lack of demand to be quite obvious on the buyer side here. People are trying to buy 30, 40, maybe 50 Feroxes at a well, not even at a reasonable price. Actually, at a reasonable price, it's 10, 15, 16, 22, 31, 32 Feroxes. People are trying to buy that for a, well, somewhat decent price of 40 million ISK, with like maybe 50, 60 being traded in a day. That's just no demand whatsoever, and this is of course creating quite a bit of a problem for this market. The Hurricane next, trading just above 40 million, but again you can see that trend here with the lower mineral prices show very nicely on the battle cruisers, which need more minerals, so it's quite normal to see that there. 42 million for the sellers, 37 million for the buyers. A bit more demand here, but also the numbers 1, 2, 1, 1 for lots of these buy orders, not great either. Here is the Megatron chart. Obviously arms race hit and will need a lot of time to stabilize here, or to get back up in price, I should say. 138 million for the sellers, 122 for the buyers. So this was already right in full swing on the lower mineral prices. Actually a little bit late from October down to December, going from 170 to less than 150 million. But then of course the arms race just clobbered the Megatron prices down to 120 million. And we have yet to recover at all from that. Potentially a good investment, yes, but here again, battleships are completely not in the meta for nullsec. You can see the average traded is extremely low. And as a result, you could almost say that this is a risky click to buy them. Buy a couple of battleships, definitely do so. Don't invest your entire fortune into these, I would say. The Oracle next, going back up in price but staying below 70 million, so definitely staying below average. Again, the pattern showing up quite nicely from late summer down in price here to 65 million ISK at the low end, 70 million, 71 for the sellers, 61 for the buyers. Just a margin increasing here. Demand again, if you look at it in station 1, 3, 4 up to 5, that's really about it. Then they want 60 million, so it's not a lot of demand for oracles and Tech 1 ships in general. The Raven, again arms race story, trying to get back, selling for 142 million, 131. At least a little bit of a comeback compared to the Megatron, but also definitely very cheap. The Retriever next, staying below 20 million, sellers just above that, buyers are at 18 million ISK here. 166 of them, 30 of them, decent supplies. Some of them are a little bit older, but this is just going to keep the price in check. Retrievers unfortunately are not going anywhere. Somewhat more demand as well, 66 and 100 here is not so bad, but it's just not happening with the low mineral prices. The Tempest next, arms race, pretty obvious. You can see the pattern, although here again a bit of a late downward trend from the minerals, which is on the one hand it is to be expected, because battleships have been in such low demand that there must have been some inertia due to existing stocks on the prices. And it takes a bit more time and a bit more effort to produce something that's really not in the meta. But that does also mean that we went down quite sharply from 180 million to 150 million in 2 months. I think is a pretty decently sharp drop. But of course now the arms race event is putting everything completely out of whack when it comes to these battleships. So the Tempest selling for 145 million is trying to come back a little bit better than the others, and 127 million for the buyers. Pretty wide margin once again. The Thrasher staying above 1.25 million. Again, interest in these typical gang destroyers is quite interesting. I would say perhaps there is a good chance that there is another burn Jita in the works amongst the Imperium. Almost 1.2 million for the sellers and almost 1.2 million for the buyers as well. Not bad. The Tornado next. That is the one thing that I would expect to be up in price as well then, but Tornado is staying really cheap at less than 60 million ISK, 58.5 for the sellers, 53 million for the buyers. Next up here we've got a Tristan, slightly up, trying to get back to 500,000 ISK here, 484 for the sellers, 423 for the buyers, but not much to say except that this is counter to the trend. The Tristan, it's a frigate, so you don't need a lot of minerals, but you would expect this to actually be on the downward trend considering mineral prices. Venture here also staying slightly up, so maybe it's alpha clone activity, because it's lots of frigates and destroyers that are showing this interesting pattern. Maybe it's alpha clone activity that is increasing interest a little bit in these ships. So the Venture selling for 285, but it's still above average for the entire year, and the Tristan is on average, even at the higher end of the average for the entire year. So this is quite interesting, and obviously the Thrasher and the Catalyst are above average as well. So yeah, maybe alpha clone activity in small ships is what driving some of these prices, and that should mean, considering what the mineral market has done over this period of time for the Tristan and for the Venture, but especially for the Thrasher, which from here to here you would expect this to be down to like 750,000 ISK or something like that. This should actually mean a somewhat decent margin for these ships, whereas the Vexor, very popular PvE ship here, shows that pattern. September up to 11 million, now selling for 9.5 million, buyers at 8.9 million. Very cheap Vexors again, and so this not showing up in these small ships, I would say alpha clone activity. I don't have any other explanations except maybe then a Jita burn in the works. That's possible as well. So yeah, the Tech 1 market, there you go guys. Gonna be very tricky to actually produce anything and make profit on that, because just demand isn't there. So you know that, well, I've said a couple of times now that I am going to try to get back into some industry as well. And as a result, really the most important part is to try and find out if you can supply a certain market with a certain set of items that is in high demand there. Something very specific. Ammo types for the right rats, for instance, is always a good choice. Maybe some of the popular ships, depending on the group that lives nearby. Stuff like that is really what you need to do if you want to get into industry at the moment on the ground level for Tech 1. Next up, the Tech 2 ships, 37520. There we go. Let's see if the trend continues here. So it's all been a battle between, is 30 to 35 million a new normal price range after the moon mining changes, or are we going to get back down to the previous trade ranges? And here the Aries, again, a lockstep move down to less than 30 million ISK. Sellers coming in at 29.9, buyers at 26 million. Definitely a decently wide margin here once again, showing at the moment, especially on the 20-day moving average, that I think the market does intend to find an average that's a lot closer to what we had before the moon mining changes. Next up here we've got Cerberus also showing that, so in lockstep down to 250 million ISK and now heading for 230, 237 for the sellers, 212 for the buyers. Not that much of a margin, but we also need to go down less in order to get back on the average prices before the moon mining changes here. Next up we've got the Claw also breaking through 30 million ISK, so that's the second frigate that does that. 29.3 for the sellers, 26.3 for the buyers. Again, still a decent margin as well. I would say more than 10% if I'm not mistaken. 3 million on something that's less than 30 million should be more than 10% margin here. Quite significant, and showing that there is still room down, I think. Will we be able to at some point get buying opportunities at 20 million? That's still difficult to predict, but the idea of purchasing at 30, because we might be able to sell at 35, I think is starting to not be possible anymore. Here the Crow next, also breaking through 30 million without too much resistance. 29 million for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. Next up here we've got the Crusader, same story, just going straight through there. Here we're talking 29.2 and 27 million for the first buyer, but then 25.5 million. I find this interesting. It is a less popular ship, I think, but it's still an interceptor, so very, very useful in nullsec. And this one buyers even lower than the 26 million that we're seeing with the others. So again, showing that we just need patience, especially on some of these destroyers here. For instance, Interdictor staying really high above 70 million ISK, 77 for the sellers, 61 for the buyers, though very wide margin. It's just that yeah, they can't supply enough of these just yet. At the moment, it's the frigates that are showing the pattern first. Hopefully they're showing us the way. Hound also same story, breaking through 30 million, 29.4, 26.5 for the buyers. And I wouldn't be surprised if we continue this. It might be a slow trend, but I do think at some point we're actually going to normalize to like less than 25 million maybe as the buy opportunity, maybe even 20 million again. Who knows? Quite interesting. Next up here, the Ishtar slowly trending back down as well. Still a ways to go. 200 million would be the goal. 266 for the sellers, 250 for the buyers. It is of course a very popular ship, one of my favorites. Manticore breaking through 35 million, heading for 30. Manticore stealth bomber that always commanded a bit of a premium compared to the others. 33 for the sellers, 22.6 for the buyers though. That is what's really crazy here. 10 million ISK margin. That's like 30% on this one. That is quite significant actually. If you're trying to find out what's going to happen on the longer term for the Tech 2 markets, should I make a move on the Aries, on these buyers at 26 million or not? Well, the Manticore is saying absolutely not. Have some patience, the market is going down even more. The Nemesis next, also here again breaking straight through the 30 million mark, is gonna be the name of the game this week for the Tech 2 frigates. 29.5 for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. Once again, that's right on the dot for the averages. And again, keep these buy orders in mind. I would say we need more patience because I think we could go even lower. The Pontifex, okay, not that long ago, actually playing with a 1-year high at 130 million, showing the first signs that that's enough for the market. Currently selling for 85 million though, still very expensive. Buyers coming in at 80. These command destroyers are still definitely extremely expensive. Purifier next, trying to get through 30 million. Are we succeeding or not? No, 31.7 for the sellers, 28.7 for the buyers. Exact opposite of the Manticore, much narrower margin and actually a little bit higher. So this one would be well, don't expect 20 million to come back, the Purifier. But then the Manticore says, yeah, expect 20 million to come back. Interesting. The Raptor next here, actually flat, and that's quite interesting. Selling for 34 million, buyers coming in at 27 million. So also decent margin, room to go back down, but the market is actually willing to keep pumping out a lot of money for the Raptors. I think it's missile based. If we look at the fittings here, no, only one launcher. So okay, I would expect missile based to be very popular because of that, but nope, maybe the Raptor for some other reason is a super popular interceptor. The Saber interdictor staying above 70 million ISK, but market's gonna try that. I think next 70.5 for the sellers, and here is, that's interesting, 177, another 88, another 106. That's a decent supply of these interdictors. 65 million for the buyers. We might break through the 70 million by next week on the Saber. The Stiletto next, also trying to get through the 30 million barrier. 29,999,986 for the seller, so just below 30 million ISK. 27,500 for the buyers. Not a lot of margin, so this is obviously a slowing down here. But another one that I do think will get below 30 million at some point, especially with still 185 here, 97 here, 52 here. Decent supplies still alive. The Stork staying at 90 million is very, very expensive. Buyers 83. That one is not moving. And then finally we have the Taranis also showing the pattern here, breaking straight to 30 million. Sellers at 28 million. Buyers again here 22.9 million. Compared to that entire chart, that's around here, back on the average before the moon mining changes. Very important note here that a couple of those frigates are actually showing buy orders in that range, in my opinion. We could still go either way. All of this could be just, I don't know, for some reason an oversupply that is not going to last, but at the moment I would say that this is the start of the decline and not yet the end for Tech 2 ships. Very interesting, of course, but too risky for me to start investing in. Next up, the Tech 3 market, 40-40. There we go. As always, we'll start with some destroyers. Let's see what the Confessor is doing. Continuing its quite volatile existence between 40 and 60 million, which is actually a decently wide margin, I feel, for these moves here. So here again, 59 million, and now back down to average price of 44.7 million. 45 million for the sellers, basically 42 million for the buyers, 358 of them coming in. So I'd say that there's once again room to go back down even lower, close to that 40 million at some point for the Confessor. It's a little bit weird that volatility just continues to show up here in the Confessor market. It's actually quite unique in that at least it was until right now, because here is the Hecate actually shooting up to 60 million ISK, yep. 55 now for the sellers, so already on its way back down, but you can see the lack of sell orders. 50 million for the buyers. Slight sell opportunity if you manage to purchase them for, let's say, 42.50, something like that. You now definitely have a sell opportunity. So Confessor still staying volatile, definitely some potential there. Buyers at 42 million. If you look at this chart, not bad. Not bad, buyers at 42 million. And then the Hecate all of a sudden also showing a sell opportunity, showing some volatility. Next up, the Jackdaw, let's take a look at that. That one is still on the, we're staying at 50 million and we are happy to be here. Chart 47.5 for the sellers, 44 million for the buyers. Narrow margin, supplies, nothing too overwhelming. For the Hecate, 208 here, but that's an older order from a couple days ago. It's weird, I'm not seeing the volume increase either. Where is this coming from? I'm not exactly sure. And then here this Vebel also pretty stable, actually moving between 40 and 50 million. 45 for the sellers, 42 for the buyers, 290 here. So that's going to stabilize things once again. But the Confessor here, oversupplied even at these 45 million. So you can, I think, purchase these for close to 42 million, which I think would make a good investment. And strange volatility in the Confessor, now also a little bit in the Hecate. Where is this going? Potentially we might be looking at some trading in these tactical destroyers. If indeed, like me, you feel like the Tech 2 market might be too risky, I would say, yeah, buying some of these Confessors at 42 million, buy 3-4 of them. You can definitely unload that at a nice sell opportunity. If again we can reach 58 million, something like that, that would be pretty damn good. So yeah, very interesting situation. Next up, the cruisers. Here is the Legion dropping back down to 150 million as well. But here, that's bad news, of course. Selling for 150, buyers are at 139, but 156, 60, 60, 40. That's a decent amount of supply that should keep the price from spiking back up here on the Legion. For the Loki, same thing, settling at 180, at 175 actually, with 240 and 100, buyers at 162. Should again, 340 units should help stabilize the Loki a little bit. Next up here we've got the Proteus going to 150 in price, up in price a little bit, not bad for the good old Proteus. 149 for the sellers, 138 for the buyers, but here we got 400, 24, 20, 17, 9. If this guy becomes a bit of impatient, he might reset that at around 150 to try and at least have a chance of unloading these Protei. Should again help stabilize this cruiser. And finally here we've got the Tengu flattening out at the current range. 145 for the sellers, 136 for the buyers. Now again 174, 173 here. It's a decent supply, which should stabilize the cruiser market again. So if you're looking for that opportunity to do some trading in some ships, I would say look at the Confessor if you're looking to buy. Look at the Hecate if you're looking to sell. And potentially, I'm not seeing it in the volumes, but potentially these tactical destroyers here, definitely a big increase in supply on this downtrend, but it shows back again and again. Does the Hecate show? Yeah, it shows these as well. I think those are in the meta enough in Gnostic as well, that there is some big moves happening here, creating opportunities for you to trade on, I think. And then for the extra product this week, first week of 2018, I'm going to take a look at the Gnosis. It's just a personal interest, 47.35. There we go. And the reason is it's very popular. It's a very good ship as well. And you actually can't really produce it in the game as the same way as any other ship. I don't think that there are Gnosis BPOs, but I do have several Gnosis BPCs myself, and so I'm a little bit interested in seeing exactly what is going to happen here. So we start the year at less than 40 million ISK, and we end the year selling Gnosis for 48 million, so slight increase but not too much. 44 million for the buyer, still very affordable, decent availability, decent demand as well. That's definitely not so bad, but we can see that we went up to 60 million for the Gnosis in September, and that was definitely a nice high point. And that was a great sell opportunity. I think here again, this decrease in price, these increased volumes, is people bringing more Gnosis to the market when they see that they can sell them at 55 million ISK. And this, I think, is something to remember. There are lots of BPCs out there that CCP gave out, but I don't think at the moment the potential for the amount of Gnosis to come to the market is stable. You can't just create more BPCs out of thin air for this ship. And so here again, it's not as good, I would say, as the Gecko, because the Gecko is quite unique and a lot less available. But you can see from this pattern here, also high price, slightly increasing volume, and then crashing down of the price on higher volumes as well, that there are some people that look at what the market is doing for the Gnosis, and when the price is right, you can very easily produce some of those Gnosis from those blueprint copies. I think it costs like 1 tritanium to make one or something crazy like that. And so this is very interesting ship in my opinion. It's pretty cool as well. It's not overpowered, but it looks great. It allows you to try out many different weapon types because it's got bonuses for all of them, and you can really do a lot with this ship. But the trend here for the year has been up in price. I would say that that's pretty good news. And what I am seeing is that availability is still a little bit too high to take the gamble on making these valuable investments, because when the price goes high enough, I think that some people are ready with production of some extra Gnosis from the good old BPCs that CCP has given us as gifts. I think it was mostly for like the anniversary and Christmas and things like that, they do still potentially flood the market to much lower prices. So yeah, not the ones to invest in just yet, but definitely something I would say to keep an eye out for. And if you can produce some of those, wait for the right price. You can see that 55 and 60 million is not crazy potentially for the Gnosis. Pretty cool. That's going to be it for this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next time.